one of the concepts of Christianity that I don't think is talked about as much today as it used to be is the concept of the Antichrist. Now, oddly enough, as much press as that used to get, the term Antichrist is found only in the books of 1st and 2nd John in the New Testament. We heard one of them, well, we heard actually two of them for our New Testament reading. It says, as you have heard, Antichrist is coming, even now many Antichrists have come. Then it says, he is Antichrist who denies the Father and the Son. Every spirit that does not confess that Jesus Christ has come in the flesh is not of God, and this is the spirit of the Antichrist, which you have heard was coming and is now already gone out into the world. Many deceivers have gone out into the world who do not confess Jesus as coming in the flesh. This is a deceiver and an Antichrist. Now, these are a couple of things to notice about these passages. First of all, they do not present the Antichrist. They present Antichrist plural, and they present it not as something that we have to wait for, but that was in the world 2,000 years ago. So it's very important to realize that. Now, the second thing to notice pertains to the actual word Antichrist. The prefix for that word, anti, is something that we normally associate as meaning against or in opposition to, but it can mean before. That word antebellum means the period in the United States before the Civil War. The anterior portion of your body is a medical term that refers to the front of your body. This is the anterior portion, the front or before. So the term Antichrist in the letters of John could mean against Christ, or it could mean before Christ. Before not in the sense of time-wise before, but in the sense of something placed ahead of or in front of Christ. Now, of course, all this is very different from what we used to hear in pop Christianity, which talks about the Antichrist as an evil figure coming shortly before the end of the world. And that's because that at some point, the concept of Antichrist from 1st and 2nd John began to be intermingled with the concept of what's called the beast of Revelation. The 13th chapter of Revelation speaks of a living creature rising up out of the sea. It has a grotesque appearance, but it nonetheless impresses people because it does wonderful things. It performs miracles. Everybody is enthralled with it and everyone worships it. Then another creature rises up out of the earth. It has the authority of the first living creature, and it makes people worship this first one. It also performs great miracles and great deeds, and everybody's enthralled with this thing. It tells people to make an image of the first beast, and they do, and the image speaks, and this again enthralls people. And this is the one who makes everyone get a certain mark on them before they can buy or sell anything popularly called the mark of the beast. Now later on in Revelation, the followers of this living creature, which is just about all the people on earth, begin to make war, and Jesus comes for their defeat. It says fire came down from heaven and destroyed them all. And this is popularly referred to as the Battle of Armageddon. Now, somewhere or another in Christian history, these two things, this concept of Antichrist in 1st and 2nd John, and this concept of beast in Revelation got mixed together, and when it all got baked up, it came out as the Antichrist. Now, for our gospel reading, we heard Jesus talk about false Christs, who will deceive many with their false doctrines. The word there is pseudo-Christ. Pseudo means a fake, an imposter. It's easier to see this as the same thing as in the letters of 1st and 2nd John than it is to see the beast of Revelation. But whether or not these false Christs Jesus warned us about are the same thing that 1st and 2nd John is talking about is not clear. That cannot be determined from what we know. They could be the same thing. They could be two different things. We do not know. So, when you get right down to it, we have this handful of references to antichrists in the letters of 1st and 2nd John. You have Jesus referencing pseudo-Christ, false Christ, and then you have the beast of Revelation, which is something separate. Now, one of the earliest mentions of Antichrist outside the New Testament is from a writing which some people believe dates from the mid-2nd century and comes from a man named Polycarp. Not much is actually known about Polycarp, and scholars debate the assumptions that many Christians make about him. But anyway, this writing is purportedly by him, and it mentions antichrists, and it mentions them in the context of those who teach false beliefs, which is the same concept that we find in use in 1st and 2nd John. Now, from the author of 1st and 2nd John, we find numerous antichrists. Polycarp, or whoever wrote that, also talk about antichrists. Now, from things surviving in Christian history later, we have at least one surviving writing that considered the fall of the Western Roman Empire to be a prelude to the appearance of an Antichrist figure. And sometime in the 3rd century, we have a writing that survived that developed that said that the Antichrist would be Jewish and would build a Jewish temple in Jerusalem from which he would rule the world. So you see that sometime by the 3rd century, apparently, the idea had developed of the Antichrist. That's sometime in those first 300 years, that idea of the Antichrist had developed. At least what the author of the letters of John referred to as multiple antichrists had sort of been replaced with the idea of a single Antichrist shortly before the end of the world. Our knowledge of Christian history is too sketchy to know how and when that happened, how widespread it was, or whether there were other competing beliefs also circulating at that time. You see, just as today there is no agreement among different Christian sects about the Antichrist, you can bet that in ancient Christianity there wasn't any agreement either. We just don't know what they all were. Now, one of the most influential works that shaped the Christian conception of Antichrist in the West was written in about the year 1000 by a French Benedictine monk named Adso. Now, nobody really knows anything much about Adso other than that he wrote this little writing about Antichrist, and it was written in the style of a biography. And to write this, he went way beyond the sparse references in Scripture, and he borrowed from certain aspects of Greek mythology. And this little work by Adso in about the year 1000 is really what brought the concept of the Antichrist to the forefront. And if some of you are familiar with the early history of Christianity in the West, you know how that at times in Christian history in the West, you know, we look at the Pope today as thinking the Pope is the unchallenged head of the Catholic Church. That's not always been the case. There were times when there were competing popes, and people didn't like the popes. They tried to kill popes and stuff. So back then there was a lot of disagreement within the church in the West, and different Roman prelates began referring to those that they didn't like as Antichrist. And then in the Reformation, the reformers like Martin Luther and John Calvin picked up on that, and they referred to the Roman Catholic Church as Antichrist because they felt that the Roman Catholic Church was against Christ. And that extended to John Wesley, the father of Methodism, referred to the Roman Catholic Post as Antichrist. Now, it's interesting to look at the way an Antichrist figure has been portrayed in Christian art over the centuries. Now, today, when we think of the Antichrist, we may think of some ugly, hideous, obviously evil-looking character, something off of a horror movie, but that's not the way it was in earlier Christianity. In general, in earlier Christianity, the figure of the Antichrist was portrayed as an attractive character, a kind, benevolent-looking older man who looked really good and was just the most gentle thing you'd ever seen. Sometimes they were portrayed as richly dressed, nice-looking, benevolent kings. Now, in pop culture in the United States, the idea came to be that the Antichrist would be the son of Satan. Just like Christians refer to Jesus as the Son of God, the idea developed that Antichrist would be the son of Satan. And that idea got popularized in a lot of movies. One of them was the movie The Omen. That was out years and years ago. I don't know if any of y'all ever remember it, but it had a character in there, Damien, who was Satan's son, and he was the Antichrist. Another one that's even older than that is Rosemary's Baby. I can remember when that came out, just barely remember that, because it created a stir when Rosemary's Baby came out. You should not go see that, it's evil. And Rosemary had a son, Adrian, who was the result of Satan having sex with her. And that was back in the 60s, you just didn't talk about stuff like that. So this idea, though, of evil creatures having sex with human beings is found in ancient Christianity. It's not unique to ancient Christianity. It's in other societies as well. And it was thought that a male demon might seduce and have sex with a woman as she slept. And that's what's known as an incubus. Sometimes the child would result from that, called a cambion. And it was thought that a female demon could seduce a man as he slept, and that demon is known as a succubus. Now, the idea of spiritual beings having sex with human beings, human women, and producing children is found in the Bible. It's in the Old Testament book of Genesis. It relates how spiritual entities called sons of God came down from heaven and had sex with human women, and children resulted from that, known as the Nephilim, also known as giants, legendary men of old. And it was apparently to get rid of these cross humans from the sons of God that God set the flood in the day of Noah, although some traditions hold that Noah himself was descended from these cross humans. The same idea is also found in extra-testamental Jewish literature, not in our Old Testament, but in the Old Testament used by Orthodox Christianity. So the idea of demons having sex with human women and producing children is an idea that goes all the way back to the Old Testament and runs all the way through ancient Christianity. Now, the difference is, of course, that here, in relation to the popular idea about the Antichrist, it's not demons having sex with the women, it's Satan himself. And so there we have the history of Antichrist through the years. Originally, at least as far as we can tell from Scripture, Antichrist referred to those who teach false beliefs. It was not about the Antichrist, but rather a general term for anyone spreading false beliefs. And then at some point in Christianity, we do not know when, it got combined with this idea of the beast of Revelation to produce the Antichrist. Legends and stories about this Antichrist were created during the Middle Ages, some of which filtered down to us. Now, one thing I hope that we've seen in here before and this is something to be very careful about, and I try to keep this in mind all the time when I'm looking at the Bible, is that when we interpret the Bible, we don't do it with a blank slate. We do it with our pre-existing beliefs in mind. And if you come to the Bible with your pre-existing beliefs in mind, it's very easy to see only those things that fit your beliefs, and it's very easy then to make things in the Bible fit your beliefs by the way you interpret them. That's been done a million times in Christian history. It's something to be very careful about. In other words, we don't let the Bible speak to us. We take our beliefs and mold the Bible and interpret it in such a way to get what we already believed out of it. And I think that's very easy to do. Now, as the way it developed in pop Christianity, the idea of the Antichrist appears at a time when things go really bad in the entire world. Or at least the world as we look at it, which is basically us. This figure steps up and appears to be able to fix everything. Things are going really bad, and somebody comes along, I can fix it, I can fix it, I know what to do. And they do have some success at first. So much success that they are well regarded, and they are liked by most everyone. It's only later that people realize this figure is leading them to catastrophe. But by the time they realize it, it will be too late. The die will have been cast, and things will have been spiraling out of control. Now, there are other ideas that say the Antichrist is not a person, but a movement. You may remember a man named Thomas Sanford. Back in December of last year, he rammed his truck into a Latter-day Saints church and shot and killed 2 people. Then he set the church on fire, and 2 other people died in the fire. He believed the Latter-day Saints church to be Antichrist, and that's the Mormons. In other words, so he believed the Mormons were Antichrist. Now, one of the things that we see throughout Christian history is that whenever someone comes up that a group of Christians in a certain place don't like, they tend to refer to that person as the Antichrist. We saw how early Protestants referred to the Roman Catholic popes as Antichrist. And back in the 70s, I can remember a time in the 70s when maybe it just was, that time of my life when the stuff I heard, but I can remember a lot of speculation back in the 70s about who the Antichrist was. I remember there's a lot of people convinced that Henry Kissinger was the Antichrist. That I never went to the trouble to do this, but I heard that if you numbered the letters of the alphabet, then Kissinger, and you added them all up, you got 666. Whether that's true or not, I don't know. But I remember that. I can remember when Leonid Brezhnev, the leader of the Soviet Union, was said to be the Antichrist. Today, I have heard speculation that Vladimir Putin is the Antichrist. Now, we talked earlier about the belief that, early Christian belief that the Antichrist would be Jewish. Today, not surprisingly, there is a group of thought coming up that says, of course, you might have guessed, to be Muslim. So you see what's happening. Basically, anyone we don't like becomes a possible candidate for the Antichrist. I've even heard that AI, artificial intelligence, might be the Antichrist. I know someone who is really, scared of AI, and we talk sometime about some of the things it can do, or they think it'll be able to do, and it is scary. And so some people believe that might be the Antichrist. Now, in the end, I think that the passages in 1st and 2nd John that mention Antichrists are talking about people who spread false beliefs. I don't think they are talking about the Antichrist. I think the Antichrist is an assumption that links those passages to what's found in Revelation. The books of 1st and 2nd John say that Antichrists were there 2,000 years ago. There were many of them. And I think they're still here. And I think they've been with us since the time of Jesus. What do we do with the identity of the beast of Revelation? I always caution people to not go too far with taking the book of Revelation's images too far. It is apocalyptic literature, which means it is written in a certain style with these grotesque, fantastic images. And to try to correlate all of this stuff to specific events, specific people, or specific places, I'm not sure that's how Revelation was intended to be used. In other words, I don't think it's a puzzle to solve. Well, who is this beast, or who is that horn, or what does that represent? I don't think that's what it represents. Now, there is no doubt that many Christians believe Jesus will one day return. The world as we know it will end. And certainly things are not going well in the world today. And that might lead us to believe that the return of Jesus at the end times might be soon. And it may be. But keep in mind that there have been periods of time in the past when things weren't going well. Societies throughout history have come up, flourished, and then declined and died. And just because of the death of your society. And people are tempted to forecast the end times, and of course it doesn't happen. I think the best thing to do with Revelation, with the beasts and the Antichrist, is to look at it like every age, every generation has its own Antichrist, has its own beasts. Just as every time period and every generation has its own Antichrist, those who promote false doctrine, so will every time period and every generation have its own beasts rising up. Those who at first seem so wonderful and seem to be able to solve all of our problems, and people will be enamored with them. They will seem so good. They will say they have a solution, and it looks like they do. And at first it will seem like they're doing good. At first it will seem like things are getting better. It'll first seem like they're a gift to us from God. Because remember, the Antichrist won't seem bad, won't appear evil. It will appear good, and people will follow it. Although where they first lead us may seem good, it will end in disaster. They will be like the Pied Piper leading people off the cliff, and people won't realize what's happening until it's too late. Now, we've talked in here before about how since the dawn of human history, people have tried and tried to create a world where the good guys win. A world where the bad guys lose. A world where good triumphs. But they've always failed. If we've had people who have tried so hard, so genuinely hard, over the course of human history, but yet they have always failed, shouldn't that tell us there's some reason they have failed? Maybe it's because every age does have its own Antichrist. Every age does have its own beasts. Every age has its own deceivers who sound so good, but eventually lead to ruin. Maybe it's because in the world we live in, evil is so powerful that every time there's a chance things might get better, evil steps in and ruins it. And so maybe we just have to wait and trust in God to one day bring an end to it all.